In this video, I'm going to help you with your email deliverability. Now, this is going to be basically, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 factors that affect your email deliverability. Like what is causing your emails to potentially go into your spam folder or the promo folder, or maybe not even get delivered at all. Like what are those key things that are making that difference? And these are things that I found just by testing and by sending out emails, what really truly affected it. And also by, this is something we do for all our clients as well, in helping to manage their emails. So what I'm going to show you is just stuff that I've discovered, and this is going to be effective for those people who are sending probably under about 250,000 emails or so per month. Okay. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump in. So the first one is going to be your IP address that you're sending from. Now, generally, you're not going to have any control over this because if you're using something like MailChimp or Mailgun or SendGrid or whatever the email provider you're using to send out your emails, they generally give you like a shared IP address. Now, in some cases, you can upgrade and add on a dedicated IP address. I don't know if I'd quite recommend that because for the smaller senders, because that could be more harm than good because everything kind of roots from the IP address. So if your IP has a bad reputation, then it's going to make everything else I'm going to show you even more difficult. So if you take over your own reputation, you kind of screw it up. It's going to take a while to repair it, longer than if you just kind of let the overall bulk of emails being sent from everyone keep that IP good. Now I'm going to show you how you can check the reputation of the email or of the IP address that you're sending from later, so you can determine, like, how do I even know if I have a bad reputation on my IP address? I'm going to show you how you can figure that out in a little bit. So the IP address is not as big of a thing for the smaller senders, so you're probably going to just leave that alone. I will say, though, if you do find out that your IP address has a bad reputation, what I've done in the past is I've just emailed the email service provider, also known as the ESP, and I just asked them, hey, my email or my IP address has a bad reputation. Can you please change it? And I don't know why this thing is writing so sloppily, but whatever. We'll try and work with it. Okay. Number two is going to be the domain reputation. Okay, the sending domain. So where are you sending from? All right. So for example, in our business, we have our main domain, which is LinkU.net, for example. And then for our marketing, we have different domain. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to separate or have separate marketing and it like kind of your communications. I know it's bad. Sorry. For your domain name. So one domain you'll have over here, and that'll be domain 1. And then we'll have a different one over here. That's domain 2. And that way you're not like commingling those. For example, if you have communications through your sales or support department and stuff like that, we want to keep that separate with our communications so they don't get mixed in with, if we send out a marketing email and that's going to promos or whatever, right? Or get spam reports or the domain gets messed up as far as reputation. So we definitely want to make sure that we keep these separate from each other. All right. So that's kind of a big lesson. If you're not already doing that, when you start doing your email marketing, keep those separate. The other thing too, with your sending domain is, again, it's going to have a reputation that's basically created by all the other factors I'm going to show you next, like your bounced emails and your spam reports and your open rates and all those kinds of things, which I'm going to go over. And that builds a reputation for your domain. Now, if you're wondering, well, how do I check the reputation for my domain? I'm going to show you how to do that in a little bit, how you can use a tool to check your IP address, basic reputation, and also your domain reputation. Another thing with your domain is there's special records you have to add to make sure that your emails are basically authenticated. Like you're basically giving permission to your provider whether it be MailChimp, whether it be LinkU, whether it be Mailgun, any of these places, permission to send mail on your domain's behalf. So usually you're going to have to set up something called an SPF record. All right, that might sound familiar to you. You also have a DKIM record. And then you also have something called a DMARC record, which is more of a monitoring record, which is a whole kind of different thing. I have a different video that talks a little bit about that. But basically, these are the records that generally have to be set up for your domain that you're using for your marketing or for your communications. Either way, they've got to be set up. All right. So what are these? Well, generally, I'm not going to get too into the details there, but when you set up your Mailgun or you set up your CRM, whatever it is you're setting up to send emails out from, they're generally going to have some email configuration for the DNS, for that domain name, where you're going to go into GoDaddy, you're going to go into wherever that DNS is managed, wherever that domain is managed, the DNS record specifically, and you may need to add a line of, I don't want to say code, but it's a DNS record, a line of text that you add in. You may usually just have your support people do it for the domain or whatever, and it's going to give you the SPF, the DKIM. DMARC is generally separate. You got to go do a whole separate thing for that. But these are records that you're going to have to add to your domain, because if they don't exist, what's going to happen if you're going to end up in basically spam. Like almost every single time you'll end up not even in promos, like if this doesn't exist or this doesn't exist, and I made a whole video about the changes coming here on DMARC, then you're just going to actually go straight to the spam folder. All right. So you want to make sure that you handle those and get those taken care of. Again, go to your ESP, MailChimp, whatever. It doesn't matter who it is. Go contact them about these records, and they'll generally have instructions on how to set those up. And more than likely, you might have set them up when you were setting up the domain with them. Okay. So that is a huge thing when it comes to your domain reputation and your domain authentication as well. Right. And then the third thing we're going to look, and domain is super important, by the way, because the domain is the one thing you do have control over because it is your domain. And second is something that if it does get messed up and I show you how to track it, you're going to have to kind of rebuild reputation. Now, some people will say, well, let me just register a new domain and start over. Sometimes that's harder than just rebuilding reputation of the domain you already have. And sometimes it's not as easy as an option, because now you have to go back through and you have to go reconfigure and reset up a whole new domain if you go and set up, if you have to start over again, which you don't really want to have to do that unless the domain's really just trashed. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to avoid creating a bad reputation for our domain to begin with. And to do that, these are the things next that I'm going to show you is how you're going to avoid doing that. So for the third one, you're going to watch out for bounced emails. And bounced emails is basically going to happen if you are emailing a list that maybe you haven't emailed for a while, right? Maybe it's been a year or months or however long, and now you go ahead and you want to send a bulk email out, and what you're going to have is you're going to have a bunch of bounced emails, and that's one of the first things that are going to mess up your domain reputation. So one thing that we do for our clients a lot of times is before we, like if there is a list they haven't been in really good communication with before, we will clean it up using something like Kickbox. So this is just one. You could just search basically, email address verification services. This is the one we use. It's pretty cheap. I think it's like 1 cent per email, at least at the time of recording this. And you basically just upload your list in there, and then they'll go ahead and clean it up and remove any of like the info ads, emails, and all the basic stuff, and then any bad emails. So it doesn't mean it's going to eliminate bounces, but it's going to drastically reduce it. So that would be the first thing that I'd recommend doing before sending out to any emails that maybe you haven't sent for a while. The other thing too, obviously, is don't send cold. All right, because if you're sending out cold through this domain, that's a whole different topic. So I'm not even going to get into cold emails. Like if you're watching this to be like, how do I get my cold emails delivered? That's just a whole different strategy. All this stuff still applies. It's just way more hard, like way harder to make it all work. Okay. So these are emails basically of people that have opted in or are in your database at some point. So they have some recognition of you, even if it's old. Like I found cold even versus old. Old is still going to do way better than cold. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, so the fourth one, or the fourth item you want to look out for is going to be your spam reports. All right, so what does that mean? Well, you know, in your email box, whether it be your Yahoo or Google, there's a little button there that says report as spam. Okay, when you do that, you're really messing up the email sender, okay? Because what happens is that puts basically a feedback report, sends to the email service provider to basically tell them like, hey, this was marked as spam. So basically when it comes to spam, you're given like, there's like a threshold of 1 out of 1,000 emails. All right, so I think it's 0.1. It's like 0.1% basically. All right. That's the threshold. And so it's basically 1 out of 1,000. So if you send out 1,000 emails and one person reports it as spam, that's basically kind of like the max. If 2 people, you're going to be at, 0.2, and that's bad. And if it's 0.3, you're really in bad shape. And this is one of the main things, one of the biggest things that are going to affect your domain reputation, right? So this is something you want to watch out for. And this is why when I say sending cold is one of the more challenging ways to do it, because that would greatly affect your spam report. Okay. Now, again, there's a way to kind of look at the way Google, for example, looks at your spam reporting. And I'm going to show you how to do that. But this one right here, you have to be very careful with in regards to your spam reports. All right. The fifth one, and how do we avoid spam reports, Wes? Well, we're going to get into that next. So the fifth one we're looking at also is our open rate. And I'm sorry for this. This notepad I thought worked way better than this. But anyway, you have your open rate. So this is how many people are opening your emails. What percentage of people? So you really want to keep this greater as often as possible. You really need it to be greater than 25%. All right. Ideally higher, but 25% is kind of that minimum where you want your open rate to be. And it's not always going to be fully accurate with the open rates and your ESP. They're going to give you the best, estimate that they can. But yeah, you definitely want to try and be over that 25% whenever possible. If you're floating around at 5%, 6%, 10%, it's going to mess up your domain reputation, right? So how do we get a better open rate? Well, if you're seeing low open rates, it's more than likely because you're already going to the spam filters, you're already in the promo folder, or basically, you're just not being seen. So that's going to be like, if you are seeing low open rates, that's going to be likely the cause right now. And so now you got to figure out how are you going to get out of that, basically out of that reputation. So I'm going to show you again, we're going to look at how do you check all this so you can see, is this repairable, or are you going to be better off maybe going with a new domain name and starting fresh? So open rates is something to look out for. You want to keep that over 25% by having relevant subject lines. If you are using like curiosity-based subject lines, I won't call them necessarily clickbait, but just kind of like very general. You want to just be careful with using that too often, because people might get frustrated with that if you're misleading them. Those are the number one things. If you use very misleading subject lines, that's generally what's going to affect you'll get a great open rate, but then that's going to mess up your spam report, right? Because they're going to feel tricked and they're going to click on report as spam. So you can kind of start seeing how all these things really start connecting together, right? All right. And number 6 is going to be your clicks. How many people actually click through the email? This is also known as CTR. And I'm sorry about this sloppy writing. This pad is giving me a lot of weird, like when I rest my hand on it, whatever. Anyway, so you got your clicks, and that's the CTR. So that is once they open your email, how many people are clicking through to the link, if there's a link in there, if a link is even relevant, or is this just to elicit replies? So clicks, CTR doesn't always have to be there because, you know, a lot of emails, especially non-marketing emails, they don't really have CTRs. They don't have clicks. They're usually like conversational, right? But if you are sending out a marketing email and the clicks are very low, or, you know, there's some issue there, then again, they're going to, the ESP or the Google or Yahoo, whatever, are going to kind of look at that. So what you want to do to get higher click-through rates is you want to lead with value, especially if you haven't emailed for a while, as opposed to just like, hey, call me, or hey, you're asking them to fill out a form, or asking to set an appointment, or asking for something. Those are going to get very low click-through rates, if any at all. So what I usually recommend is maybe like linking to maybe a video you created, or something free to download, or something like that initially, just to kind of get those click-through rates up. And doing that every once in a while. You don't have to do it all the time, but every once in a while, those are going to get your best click-through rates. At least that's what I found with my emails, is definitely providing value first. Videos, again, worked really, really well, like a tip, or here, you know, here's how you do this and that, and just linking to the video usually worked very well, which actually leads to another thing when it comes to the links in the email. All right, that actually plays a big role. So the links in the email are going to play a big role that I found. Sometimes if my emails would go into spam or go into promo, and then I would change the link that it's linking to link to something else or a different domain or whatever, and then it would go to primary, right? So the link in the email. So if you're using like Bitly, or using, you know, those URL shorteners that tend to be associated with a lot of, you know, clickbait, or, you know, phishing schemes or things like that, you're more than likely going to end up getting filtered. Or if you, again, your domain has a bad reputation and you're linking to a domain with a bad reputation, or has some kind of malware on it or something like that, you're going to, or is associated with a lot of your spam emails, right? Because there's this association that's happening here when people report an email as spam and the domain linked in there. You see how this reputation, it's all kind of linking together. That's going to get a poor reputation for the domain that's being linked in the email. So if you're having trouble there, you may also want to check where you linking in the email. Again, if we go back to our CTR thing over here, okay, if I'm trying to rebuild my reputation, I might do a click to a video, and then I might go ahead and just link that straight to like a YouTube link. Okay, because now, well, what's the reputation of a YouTube video, of YouTube? Pretty good, right? Of the domain. So I'm going to try and leverage that reputation in my links to try and rebuild my reputation. And then again, where am I linking to? One way you can solve that is maybe by using a redirect, getting your own custom redirect URL. I use a redirect called short. I'll write it in here. .cm. All right. And so, yeah, I use short.cm. And so you can go ahead and use that one. If you want to use, you know, you want to link a custom domain to it. That's the only way I would do it. And then you can have that link to whatever. Okay. And then try and build your reputation that way. So keep that in mind, the links, and then also how many links are in your email. If you have a lot of links going to different places, or just a lot of links all going to the same call to action multiple times, that kind of tells Google that this is a, you know, marketing email. So it's more likely to probably put it in the promos folder, not necessarily spam, even if you have a good reputation all the way around. So that's something else to consider, as well as the number of links that you have in your email could affect where it delivers. Okay. All right. The next thing is going to be the content of the email, which obviously is going to affect, right, the content of your email. So the content of your email, what is in there, right? So it's going to be looking at, is this a short email? Is it a long email? Is it kind of like marketing text? Is there call to action text? Are those kind of those keywords that are kind of salesy, that are going to kind of trigger it and put it into the promos? So I try and make my emails feel more conversational. The more conversational they feel, the better they're going to be delivered into the primary box, right? So again, you have to consider all these things that are going to kind of determine where it's ultimately delivered. But having that content, maybe doing it I found either having them really short, right? Either really short emails worked really well to get into primary, or longer emails. It's kind of that middle ground that ends up getting filtered, I found a lot of times. But again, that's going to vary based on a lot of the other variables here, right? And all the other factors. So sometimes you'll see people with emails, there'll be something like I kind of do, and then there'll be like this long disclaimer, copyright, legal jargon, whatever on the bottom. And that kind of throws off the content, right, ratio. And so those generally will get delivered to the primary. That doesn't always work, but that is one way that sometimes people use to counteract it. Maybe not all the time, but that does sometimes work. So just keep in mind, what is the content you're putting in email? Is it relevant to the subject? Is it real salesy? These are things that are obviously going to deliver it, whether to be to promo or to spam or to primary. And just experiment with different emails over time and kind of track or keep track of what kinds of texts and what kinds of emails are working. Or maybe are there words that are maybe in the emails that you're using that are getting you triggered or getting it moved into the promo folder. All right. So those are all the different factors. So basically, to keep track on your reputation and see how your domain's doing, IP and that kind of thing, you can use a tool called Google Postmaster Tools. And if you go to Postmaster Tools, essentially what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and add your domain in there. And then they actually have a way for you to track your domain, what kind of reputation it has, what's the IP reputation, sending domain, what your bounced emails look like, your spam reports and stuff like that. So you can see how you're doing and keep track of it. Now, this is going to help you to kind of, if you have a bad reputation, use some of the things I taught you in this video to kind of bring that reputation back out of there, or determine if you have to start with a whole new domain. I'm going to go ahead and create a whole separate video on how to use Postmaster Tools to do that, how to add a domain and kind of look at the reports and things like that. So be sure to check out that YouTube video. So hopefully you find this video helpful in getting your emails delivered. That's all for me. If you are a client of LinkU already, all this stuff that I just talked about, we kind of do for you. Now, that's one of the best things about being a client with LinkU and Follow-Up Assistant is we handle all this stuff for you when we set up your domain name and we set up all the DKIM, SPF, and DMARC records, and all that stuff is all part of what we offer here at LinkU and helping you to manage and create a domain that keeps and has a great reputation out of the gate, along with everything else that we offer. So if you're interested in getting help with that, or you just really don't want to manage all that and you would like help with it, check out LinkU. We might be able to help you out with that. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.